They died without getting what they were promised. Every single one of them. And the verse doesn't treat that as a tragedy, it treats it as a qualification. That's Hebrews 11, verse 16. And I think it might be the most disorienting sentence in the whole chapter. Because buried inside one clause is an admission that God had every reason to walk away from these people. And the verse says he didn't. So, the book of Hebrews is a sermon. Not a letter, not a treatise, a sermon. Delivered to a congregation of Jewish believers, probably in Rome, somewhere in the mid-60s AD. And these people are exhausted. They'd been publicly shamed. They'd had property confiscated. They'd watched leaders die. And the thing they were promised, the return of Christ, the vindication of everything they'd staked their lives on, hadn't come. And meanwhile, the synagogue down the road was still standing, still respectable, still protected by Roman law, still offering visible sacrifices in a visible temple to a God you could worship without anybody taking your house. They were drifting back, not dramatically, quietly, the way you drift. And chapter 11 is the preacher's countermove. He stops arguing theology and starts calling names. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, a whole parade of people who lived and died without receiving what was promised and were not disappointed in God. Verse 16 is where he steps out of the parade and tells you what every single one of them was actually doing. Let me read it plainly. They desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Sounds almost gentle, right? Almost warm. The commentaries all land there, on the warmth. God isn't ashamed of them. Beautiful, comforting. Move on. But the Greek is doing something the English irons flat. And it's not gentle at all. Start with the verb the English renders desire. Oregontai. This is not preference, not wishing. The root is orego, to stretch yourself out, to extend your body towards something you can't quite reach. Classical Greek used it for a hand reaching across a table. Paul uses the same root in 1 Timothy for someone grasping after money. It's a posture word. It's what your body does when your fingers are 2 inches short. And it's present tense, middle voice, ongoing. Not they once desired. Not they had a stretch of longing. They are, continuously, characteristically, as the defining orientation of their entire lives, stretching towards something they cannot close their hands around. That's what the author says faith looked like for Abraham. Not a decision he made at the front of a tent. A posture his whole life was leaning into. Now the word, better. Kreittonos. Hebrews uses this word 13 times. More than any other book in the New Testament, and it's functioning as a technical term. Not slightly improved. Not the upgraded version. Kreiton in Hebrews means belonging to a categorically different order of reality. A better covenant. Better promises. Better sacrifices. The old wasn't broken. It was shadow. The new is Kreiton because it's substance. So when the text says they desired a better country, it's not saying they wanted a nicer Canaan, warmer weather, fewer Hittites. It's saying they were oriented toward a country that belongs to the real order, the one Canaan was only ever a sketch of. The land promise was never the destination. The land was the visual aid. But the verb tense that keeps pulling me back into this verse is the last one. Hētoimasen. He has prepared. Aorist. Completed action. Every other verb in this verse is present tense. They are reaching, present. God is not ashamed, present. He is being called their God, present, passive, ongoing. And then, right in the middle of all that continuous motion, one verb drops into the aorist. The city is prepared. Done. Not being constructed. Not contingent on whether they hold on long enough. Not waiting on their performance review. Get that tense wrong, and you produce a transaction. Keep reaching, and maybe God will build you something. Get it right, and the whole verse inverts. The city already exists. Their reaching is the only fitting response to what is already real. They are not earning a country. They are refusing to settle for less than the one that's already theirs. Now, the clause in the middle. The one that sounds like comfort but isn't, or isn't only. God is not ashamed to be called their God. Hētoimasen, an honor-shame verb. And in the first-century Mediterranean world, shame wasn't a feeling, it was a social verdict. Patrons publicly identified with clients whose success reflected well on them. They dropped the ones whose lives were going badly. That's how the economy of association worked. Your God was supposed to vindicate you. If your life looked like failure, your God looked incompetent or absent. And these people, the ones the verse is talking about, died wandering. Abraham never owned the land. He had to buy a burial plot in the territory God had promised him outright. Isaac and Jacob lived in tents. Sarah laughed at the promise. Joseph's bones ended up in Egypt. By every visible metric, God had reason to dissociate. And the verse says he didn't. Not because their lives eventually turned around. They didn't. Not because the promise finally paid out. It hadn't. He was not ashamed to be called their God because of what they were oriented toward. Because they kept reaching, kept stretching, kept refusing the visible thing in favor of the real one. The negation itself is the tell. Hētoimasen, he is not ashamed. You only need to say not ashamed when someone has grounds to expect shame. When the association looks, from the outside, like it should embarrass the more powerful party. God publicly and permanently put his name on people whose lives never paid out. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Centuries after they died still wandering, he introduces himself to Moses by their names. The naming held. My wife's father spent the last 3 years of his life mostly in a hospital bed. He was a man who had prayed for decades, faithful, consistent, the kind of quiet obedience nobody writes books about. And I watched her sit beside that bed one afternoon and say something I haven't been able to shake. She said, "I don't think Dad ever got what he asked for. Not the big things." She wasn't angry. She wasn't doubting. She was just saying it out loud because it was true. And I think that's where this verse actually lives. Not in the theology seminar. In the chair beside the bed. In the moment where someone you love has been faithful, genuinely, sacrificially faithful, and the circumstances never caught up. It's a Wednesday, mid-afternoon. You're sitting in your car in the parking garage after work. You haven't started the engine yet. The promotion went to someone else, the one who cuts corners you won't cut. And you're not devastated, exactly. You're just tired. Tired of the math not working. Tired of doing the right thing and watching the wrong thing win. And somewhere in the back of your head, a voice says, maybe the version of you that stopped caring so much would be doing better right now. That's verse 15. The author says if they had kept thinking about the country they came from, the old life, the old system, the easier road, they would have had the chance to go back. The verb is imperfect tense. Mnemoniuen. They were continuously remembering. Continuously being pulled. It wasn't a one-time test they passed with flying colors. It was a gravitational pull they resisted every single day. And what they refused wasn't dramatic. It was just the visible thing. The thing that was working for other people. The respectable religion, the career move. The relationship that didn't require this much of them. Or it looks different. You're standing on the front step, early, 6:15 maybe. The neighborhood is still dark. And you're not going anywhere. You just came outside because the house felt too small. There's a marriage behind that door that you have been faithful in for 19 years, and faithful hasn't made it easy. Faithful hasn't made it feel the way the books said it would feel. And you wonder, not in a crisis way, just in an honest way, whether God notices. Whether the faithfulness registers somewhere. Whether you're just reaching into empty air. The verse says you are not reaching into empty air, but it doesn't say that the way you want it to. It doesn't say your marriage will improve. It doesn't say the promotion will come. It doesn't say the diagnosis will change, or the kid will call, or the church will finally see what you've been carrying. It says the city is prepared. Aorist. Done. And your reaching is the only posture that makes sense in front of a reality that already exists. And it says God is not ashamed to have his name on you. Not because your life looks like success, but because your life looks like Abraham's, still stretching, still leaning, still refusing to go back to the country you came from. The honor-shame economy says God should be embarrassed by you. Your circumstances don't vindicate the association. The quarterly numbers on your faithfulness don't justify the investment. And the verse says, He has not dropped you. He is not distancing himself. He is still introducing himself by your name. I don't want to tie this up cleanly. The verse doesn't tie it up cleanly. It holds two things together that most of us want to separate. The city is prepared. That's settled, finished, done. And you are still reaching. That's present tense, ongoing, costly. Both are true at the same time. The prepared thing and the not yet grasped thing exist in the same sentence, the same breath. And maybe that's what faith actually is. Not the moment you stop reaching because you've arrived. Not the moment the circumstances finally vindicate the investment. But the sustained posture, body leaning forward, fingers 2 inches short, aimed at something you've been told is already real, built by a God who put his name on people who died without seeing it. So, the question the verse leaves me with, not whether the country is real, but what are you still reaching for that you've been telling yourself to stop wanting? What if that's the reach?